Yeah, look, I think one of the challenges, and we touched on this earlier in this discussion, is also is around how you prioritize what you do. And, particularly at work, there's a number of competing priorities that we have. And I think it's an ongoing process. Sometimes I'd like to think you may talk about challenges that sort of have a start and a finish, a bit like a project, but this one's an ongoing one, I think for everyone. And it's really important to have clarity around what are the priorities for us to deliver on and why. So not just what they are and why they are, and really making sure we communicate effectively around that. Because it's one thing to just issue a list and that's the thing, but we work really tightly with prioritizing what we do with the strategy that we have for Westpac, with the strategy that we have for technology, and then the strategy that we have for my area. And the challenge is there is just no way we can do everything that we'd like to do. And I look after very diverse areas as well. So balancing all of the different priorities that we have for the different areas. And that challenge for me means I rely very, very heavily on my leadership team, and they rely very heavily on their people to have that two-way feedback loop on what can we do, what is the highest priority to do, and what does that mean that we're not going to do? And we touched on that earlier as well. And I think that's an ongoing challenge for everyone. There's cost constraints we've got to make sure we're hitting our revenue targets, and all of those are that macro environment that comes down to deciding what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And having ongoing regular feedback and touch points with my leadership team is critical for that, because they can say there are some things that are going phenomenally well and we just keep doing those, but there are some things that maybe are not, and maybe we need to either pivot the way we're doing them, or maybe in some cases, and we had one of those this week, I need to go back to the stakeholders and say we need to stop doing something because we just don't have the resources to do it. And I think it happens at all layers of leadership within the organisation. But I think having that clarity of purpose, the clarity of strategy, and those guardrails for what we can do really helps. But it is always going to be a challenge. All the different jobs I've done in the government, in telco, in banking, it's always been around being really clear on what you can do and what you can't. And I think what really underpins that is really making sure that you're transparent. If there's bad news or you can't do something, it's absolutely critical to let people know as soon as possible, and being able to explain clearly why. And maybe it's not an indefinite no, maybe it's just a not yet, and we can come to it once something else is finished, but being transparent and really communicating those priorities effectively